Уходи!
This past week, battles surged to a 2025 record of over 1,200. The fiercest fighting remains in Pokrovsk, Lyman, Kursk, Novo Pavlivka sectors. In addition, Russia intensified its offensive on Constantinople, unfreezing a new section of the front. In fact, as was reported by Ukrainian sources just this morning, during a meeting with European partners, Vladimir Zelensky noted that Ukrainian intelligence data indicate that Russia is preparing for new offensives in such areas as Sumy, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhzhia. These areas are currently showing high activity. According to combat statistics, over the past 3 days, there have been more than 200 clashes daily, although earlier this figure was about 150. The Russians are currently focusing their greatest efforts on the Pokrovsk direction. Up north, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are completing their mop-up operations, destroying the last Ukrainian forces in the border areas in the Kursk region. There are 2 small Ukrainian bridgeheads left to destroy on Russian territory. On March 28th, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially confirmed the full control of the village of Gogolevka, located west of Sudzha. The retreating Ukrainian troops attempted to resist in the western part of the village for several days, but failed to stop the Russian advance. Russian control of Gogolevka was also confirmed by the footage of the liberated Sudzha checkpoint shared the day before. The checkpoint is located west of the village. So today I'm reporting on what even Ukrainian sources called a new Russian offensive that started this past week. We will cover the front line from Zaporizhzhia region in the south to Kursk and Sumy up north. But while this channel continues to battle a shadow ban that has limited the reach of its videos, I ask that you help support my work with super thank donations and consider joining the channel membership. Everything you need to know about the membership community and its perks are contained in a trailer video in the end screen. Now let's get into it. Over the past 2 weeks, the Russian forces have resumed their offensive in the Zaporizhzhia direction on a 15-kilometer stretch between Pyatikati and Shcherbaki, 40 kilometers from the city of Zaporizhzhia. At present, given the forces gathered in this area, Ukrainian military analysts estimate that the offensive is tactical in nature and aimed at capturing the positions that the Ukrainian defense forces liberated during the counter-offensive of 2023. In particular, the Russian troops want to capture the Ukrainian strongholds in Stepove and Shcherbaki. For this purpose, they concentrated not only a significant number of personnel, but also drones and artillery. At the same time, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Command claims that they knew about the Russian plans and prepared for defense, and therefore they were able to meet this offensive, reducing it to an advance of 2 kilometers in some areas in just about 2 weeks. Nevertheless, Russian tactical gains can be considered a tactical success, as the rocky road between Stepove and Shcherbaki was cut a few days ago. By doing so, the Russian forces complicated the logistics between Ukrainian positions. The Russians managed to engage in fighting for Shcherbaki and part of Shcherbaki, and they also entered Pokrovsk, but the Ukrainian armed forces are fighting to prevent them from gaining a foothold there. In Stepove, the front line remains stable. One Ukrainian assessment is that there are currently no signs that the Russian army wants to launch a more powerful offensive against the city of Zaporizhzhia. Most likely, their actions are related to the negotiation process, during which they were persuaded to retreat from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. For instance, Artem Tolstenko, external pilot of a separate unit of unmanned systems Typhoon of the National Guard of Ukraine, spoke about the situation in the area of responsibility of the unit in Zaporizhzhia. In quotations, the situation in the sector is dynamic at the moment. The Russian enemy is actively using a variety of tactics, including the use of armored vehicles, aircraft, and drones. The intensity of attacks varies depending on the operational situation. The Russians, he said, have begun using both fiber optic drones and aircraft-type FPV drones, which are proving effective in active electronic warfare. Automatic guidance systems and special ammunition are also being developed. The main challenge for the armed forces of Ukraine is adapting to new technologies and finding solutions to maintain our technological advantage, the military said. It is well known to the Ukrainian command that the exit and cutting of the Donetsk-Zaporizhzhia road near the village of Kumar is one of the priority tasks for the Russian military in the Novo Pavlivka section of the front. On the western flank, near the villages of Novosilka, Brylatsky, and Privlini, after a series of counterattacks by the Ukrainian armed forces, the front line froze. From the north, the Russian forces eventually managed to expand their zone of control in the village of Niponeria, to which they had been making their way along the banks of the Mori-Yali River throughout March. The Russian troops are trying to build on their success and are attacking further north toward the village of Vesely, but so far they have not been able to gain a foothold. At the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces counterattacked Studny and thus prevented the Russian offensive from developing on both banks. In the Constantinople area, the Ukrainian defense forces claim to have launched a counterattack between Oleksivka and Andriivka. Although the Russian troops have been announcing the capture of both Andriivka and Constantinople for several weeks, the Ukrainian sources claim that a significant part of these villages is either in the grey zone or under Ukrainian control. Unable to advance head-on, the Russian army went around and attacked towards Rozliv, where they expanded their control zone by 5.5 kilometers. Currently, there are ongoing battles during which the Ukrainian defense forces attempt to push the Russians away from Rozliv, but the Russians are not stopped from trying to enter the village and gain a foothold. Although almost the entire front line is now active, it is around Pokrovsk that a third of all battles in this war are taking place, more than 400 this week. The Russian armed forces have gathered their forces and are conducting a series of offensives, some of which have yielded results. In particular, they managed to retake most of Pishani. On the western flank near Ospennivka, counterattacks continued all week, as a result of which the Russian forces drove Ukrainian troops out of most of the village and launched a series of attacks on Novo Alexandrivka. Heavy fighting is currently taking place there. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to expand their control around the railway station in Kotliny. Although Ukrainian soldiers are still unable to drive the Russians out of the industrial area, this is the only seriously fortified area they hold north of the road from Pokrovsk to Mezova. On the eastern flank, the Ukrainian defense forces continue to maintain control of the Pokrovsk-Constantinople road junction. The Russian forces are trying to find Ukrainian weaknesses in other areas. This week, they managed to advance in the grey zone between Baranivka and Tarasivka and seize the village of Zeleny Pole. Next, the Russian army will try to further expand the front line towards the road to Constantynivka, which seems to be a new priority for the Russians. It has been known for a long time that Constantynivka would again be a target for the Russians, as it was the target of the offensives on Chasiv and Toretsk. This week, however, troops in the area of the Donetsk-Konstantinivka highway, redeployed here a few weeks ago from the Kurakhove front, have become more active. Although the Ukrainian armed forces had seen some success in their counterattack in Toretsk and in the New York area, the Russian forces took advantage of the additional reserves and attacked near Pantelemonivka and Alexandropol. As a result, most of Pantelemonivka is under control of the Russian armed forces, and Alexandropol has mostly fallen into a grey zone. The opening of this new front could have an extremely negative impact on the neighboring fronts for Ukraine, primarily on the Toretsk front, but also on the Pokrovsk front. The attack on Lyman is the same attack on Kramatorsk and Konstantinivka, only from the north. For a month and a half, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to restrain the Russian army and prevent a breakthrough to Lyman through Kolodvyazy or Yampolivka. Ukrainian forces even held a part of Terny, However, the other day, the Russians launched a new massive offensive and significantly expanded their zone of control in this area of the front. In particular, on the eastern bank of the Zerabets River, they completely occupied Terny and forced the Ukrainian Defense Forces to withdraw from the part of Zaporizhzhia that had fallen into the grey zone. However, the Russians still have not fully driven Ukrainian units out of Zaporizhzhia, as Ukrainian sources claim, so they shifted their focus and began attacking further south to Torsky to get into the rear of the Zaporizhzhia defenders. In the west, they managed to make an 8-kilometer breakthrough in the direction of Katerinivka and seize 14 square kilometers between Katerinivka and Kolodyazy. In this way, the Russians significantly extended the front line of their offensive to Lyman and created an opportunity to break through to Oskil in another place, south of Borova. Now up north, while the Ukrainian armed forces continue to hold the border zone near Sudzha, and the Russians are also trying to get behind Ukrainian lines in the area of Basivka village without making any progress, the Ukrainian Defense Forces have launched a new operation in the Belgorod region. In particular, the Ukrainian forces claim to have occupied the village of Demidivka and expanded their control to the north and south, creating an 8-kilometer buffer zone. There are no Russian sources that deny this. At the moment, there is no talk of an offensive deep into the Belgorod region, but Ukrainian troops have thus tied up a part of the Russian troops who were released in the Kursk region and were ready to redeploy to Ukraine. In addition, this buffer zone could become a prototype for the future border between Ukraine and Russia. However, in Kursk itself, the situation continues to worsen for Ukraine. On March 28th, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially confirmed the full control of the village of Gogolevka, located west of Sudzha. Retreating Ukrainian troops attempted to resist in the western part of the village for several days, but failed to stop the Russian advance. Russian control of Gogolevka was also confirmed by the footage of the liberated Sudzha checkpoint, shared the day before. The checkpoint is located west of the village. The video shows Russian flags raised by fighters of the 51st Regiment waving over the ruined border checkpoint. It confirms that the Russian military secured control both of the buildings and areas nearby. On the morning of March 28th, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked the Sudzha gas measuring station, presumably with the US-made HIMARS MLRS. Thus, the strikes confirm that the Ukrainian army now lost control of the facility. According to preliminary reports from the front lines, the Russian troops largely expanded their zone of control and launched assault on the last Ukrainian stronghold in the area. Russian forces reportedly entered the village of Oleshnia from the north. At the same time, Russian forces are expanding their bridgehead in the neighboring Ukrainian Sumy region. They completed the mop-up operations in the areas east of Basovka and secured their control near the border. After the main stage of the offensive in the Sudzha district was successfully completed, the Russian troops began to destroy the second Ukrainian bridgehead in the border areas near the town of Guevo. The recent Russian attacks there also forces the Ukrainian troops to retreat. Russian forces took control of the forest areas north and east of Guevo and launched an assault on the town. Russian soldiers were filmed near the local distillery. According to preliminary reports from the battlefield, the armed forces of Ukraine began a chaotic retreat in an attempt to escape from the area. Now lastly, on the geopolitical front, some of you may have already seen the video clip of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky telling French TV that Putin will die soon. If not, here's a clip that was emanated about 3 days ago.
І залежить від його років, він помре скоро, це факт, і все закінчиться. Тобто його питання він може закінчити до того, як він,
Apparently, Zelensky's statement was in response to Putin's threat to wipe out Ukrainian troops after Zelensky broke the US-backed ceasefire.
І невдале історичне життя. І ось чого він боїться.
And then, just earlier today, this happened. Euro Weekly News reports that Putin's limousine was ablaze after mysterious explosion in Moscow. The incident occurred on a street just north of Moscow's FSB headquarters, located near the Lubyanka, on March 29th. The Oros limousine is believed to be one of the president's official car fleet. Reportedly, Putin regularly makes use of the Russian-made cars and has even been known to give them as gifts. One such vehicle was presented to Kim Jong-un, among others. Currently, it is unknown what triggered the explosion or who was in the car at the time. However, media reports have confirmed that no one was injured. So what do you guys think? Was President Zelensky behind the explosion? How will Putin respond? Make sure to watch the end screen videos, as any further news on this topic will be released to channel members first.
Не знаю, шумит. Пошел.